guys, welcome back. I know you just saw my face last week, but we have Miko back in the house. What's up, girl?
Hey, happy to be back, even though with AirPods, but that should be okay still.
It'll be great. We figured out a way to meet virtually slash in person this week, and I feel like our listeners will be appreciative of that. So, one small step, guys. Alrighty. So, this week we are bringing you some of our favorite authors so that you guys can have a glimpse into what we read. I'm really interested to see what this juxtaposition is like because we'll get into it in a second, but we listen slash read vastly different things, and I think that that's hilarious. Yeah, so I will start us off, and you guys, if you're watching on the YouTubes, or I recently learned how to upload videos onto Spotify, which is dope. So if, regardless of how you're watching, you can hopefully see this chart. So my author I chose is Hannah Grace. And the way she phrases what she writes is a self-proclaimed fluffy comfort book author. I can personally tell you there is a decent amount of detailed spice in her books. There's like asking for consent in her books and open discussions about therapy within her books as well. So before we dive into the chart, just a little bit of background info on Hannah Grace. So she is an author from the UK. She writes adult romance, but like, okay, so there's detailed romance scenes, but the plot lines are really solid, if that makes sense. So judge me if you will. I love her books. They are a little smutty and I don't even care. I'm just going to self-proclaim all that right now. So Hannah Grace, she was born in 87. So math, I think that puts her in like her early 30s, mid 30s. She's 5 years older than me. How old is that? 36? Something like that. Anyway, she started writing during the pandemic, and she was saying that it wasn't like a life goal to write. It was just something that she like felt inspired to do during the pandemic, which I thought is kind of cool. And she did. Right? So she did. She wrote. And I believe her first book, Icebreaker, was self-published, and then it blew up on the TikToks. I don't have TikTok, so I don't understand how it blew up on the TikToks, but I feel like things just inherently blow up on the TikToks. So that is what happened with her first book, Icebreaker, and then it got picked up by Simon and Schuster, which is a major publishing house. I'm assuming they paid her well. And then she wrote another book from a different POV of one of the other people, like one of the other characters in her first book. And now a third book is coming out in like a month. So May of 2024-ish. So she's gained a decent amount of traction after that first book. And I think it's really cool because we're going to look at her chart. Obviously, you guys can read. But I don't have her exact birth time. I have her birth date. So I went through 4 different times of day, actually 5. I just didn't put the 5th one up here. I started at 6 a.m., then I did 9, and then noon, and then 3, and then 6 p.m. just to kind of see like where the day took her birthday. So this was the 9 a.m. chart. This is the noon chart. This is the 3 p.m. chart. And this is the 6 p.m. chart. So there are definitely some minor differences that occur throughout the day. But the thing that stays consistent, and that's really what I feel confident speaking to, is the 5-1 splenic projector piece of all of this. So there was only, I think the 6 a.m. one was a 4-1 line. So she still would have been a 4-1, or rather, she would have been a 4-1 splenic projector instead of a 5-1 splenic projector. So I don't know what time of day she was born, but just kind of based off of the knowledge that I've garnered from listening to a couple of interviews with her, I kind of have a better feeling of leaning more towards probably a 5 line than a 4 line. So just throwing that out there. Yeah. But depending, again, on the time of day, she either has a defined G center or an undefined G center. Most of the times during the day she does. So again, I'm not going to speak too much to the centers at this point and just keep it pretty high level with the 5-1 splenic projector piece of it. And I thought that was really interesting, right? Because Homegirl blew up on the talks. of ticks, the ticky talks. And if a 5-line is like, because now I'm finally understanding more about the 5 lines. Like since our initial discussion a couple of months back, I've had more 5 lines come into my life, and I get to like spend more time with them on a regular basis. So I'm understanding the 5 line a little bit more. And as a projector, right? Like if she was invited into this, and again, I don't know what that instigator for her to start writing was, like initially, maybe it was just a creative outlet to kind of express herself, which I think is beautiful. But then obviously being taken on by Simon and Schuster and being invited to writing a larger series based off of these initial characters, she's really leaning into like what she's here to do, to make that impact as a 5-line, to make that impact as a leader. And my understanding is the research piece of it for her is less about the, so this is talking about the 1-line. The research piece of it is a little less on the like science math side of things, and probably a little bit more on like the cultural, what is it like to be a college student at an American college, right? Coming from a British perspective. So I think she did a great job in her books, and I don't really want to ruin them for you, but Icebreaker and Wildfire are the 2 that I've read by her. Fantastic. Or listened to by her, because I'm more of a listener than a reader, just because I can walk with my headphones and get things done. But yeah, so that's kind of the overview of Hannah and her design to some extent. But I'd like to open the floor to you, Miko. I know you and I had chatted about my preference for books, and sometimes I go in and out of like romance book listening, but this is what I've listened to, like these 2 books I listened to back to back, and I think they're great. But yeah, I'd love your take on this, and just kind of knowing a little bit from what I've talked about, like how does this resonate? Is there anything that does resonate, doesn't resonate? And I'm happy to have a conversation about this. Go.
Well, I loved when we were talking about this. She messaged me that she's not going to be talking about these books. And I was like, oh my God, please talk about these books, because I have such a different author for you guys in store. And I thought the contrast was just too good to not go with it. So regarding your preferences, there's also an entire app dedicated to this. I have no idea what it's called, but I know that one of my favorite true crime YouTubers, she mentions it from time to time because they sponsor her. So I will give you that name later down the line. But it's full of stories like that.
Perfect.
Yes. So regarding her chart, so we're going off the 9 a.m. one, I'm assuming. And she does have the 31st gate in an open throat. So I would be super interested actually to know who she was spending time with during Corona, if she was just by herself. Do you know this by any chance?
She's married, so I'm pretty sure with her hubs.
Okay, so
her 2 dogs named Bear and Pig.
Oh my God, okay. Or Pig. I feel like Bear is a nicer name to have. So yeah, it would be really interesting to already know the influences that she experienced during Corona, because it will be, of course, it would have been a consistent energy, as we would be stuck in the same house for just a very, very long time, or in the same apartment. Also, if it's an apartment, then her neighbors play a role, depending on, for example, if you live in the same in one apartment and your bedrooms are next to one another, you will take on the energy. Like imagine your bed is on one side of the wall and their bed is directly on the other side of the wall. You will take on even that energy, because your aura spans 6 meters, so your auras would still connect. So that is also an interesting piece.
Random side note, our neighbors just moved out like 3 or 4 days ago, and my sleep has been significantly better since they left.
Oh, wow.
Bro.
See? Yeah.
And that's a townhouse. I don't know how thick our walls are, but like, that's wild.
I doubt they're 6 meters, unless you live in a castle. She just said that would be dope, but her microphone is muted, so... So that is something to keep in mind. Corona was also planetarily, I would love to see what happened during Corona. I think Corona was generally a time where you either leaned into your talent or into your light aspects, or you chose to nourish those light aspects, those good sides of you, or you chose to step into your dark aspects and you really went down the rabbit hole. Either way you chose to go. So writing was definitely a good way to go, I would say, especially for her. I mean, she's having success with it, as it seems. I have not heard of her. I also like her name, Grace, for such an author. I know that's her last name, but yeah, I like that. I like that name for an author like that. And she has the 4426 channel, so she can in herself, and this is something that seems to stay consistent throughout the day. So she can in herself be the marketing force behind whatever she's being invited into. So what I also assume is that she may have had the creative inspiration. Maybe she was telling her husband some sexy stories to get him turned on, and then he said, "Oh, you should write that," or something like that. So this may have been one of the first invitations, or she just had this creative outlet and then she started writing, and then she shared it with her husband or some people close to her, and they were like, "Yeah, you should definitely publish that. People will want to write that." So this is also your invitation. It doesn't mean that you have to be invited for just getting started, but in order to have success, usually it is an invitation that you receive as a projector. We're talking about projectors here. She has as well the Grace gate 22, and I think that also stays consistent in all of the charts. In an undefined emotional solar plexus, yes, it stays consistent. And she has this 44th gate, the marketing channel, part of the marketing channel, in her unconscious sun. So also a very, very powerful placement for the marketing aspect of things. It's also, the spleen is heavily defined. There are only 2 gates that are quote unquote missing. But yeah, it's a very intuitive, instinctive channel, instinctive center to have. It can have a lot of fear stuck inside of her or it. The 57 sometimes is defined, sometimes it is not defined, which is where we either get the 5710 channel or we don't get it. So that means she either has a defined G center or she doesn't. She has she has an undefined head and ajna, so there's a lot of inspiration flowing through, an open throat, so she can just mold her words in different ways. However, the I lead part is her strongest outlet, or her strongest way to connect with the throat in the first place. So sometimes it may be defined, other times it may not. And if we would know her husband's chart, we would also understand if maybe he bridges, or he connects, not bridges, but he connects her 12th gate with the 22nd, her 33rd with a 13, her 8 and 1, her 7 and 31, or her 48 and 16. So there are many possibilities. Or even the 1156, the storyteller, could be that one that was connected in some way. So yeah, there are many, many possibilities. An interesting chart. I'm just seeing it for the first time, as I didn't know that you were going to do her, but very interesting.
I really appreciate her as an author. Like in one of the interviews I was listening to, so she's like a medium millennial, right? Like not an elder millennial, like a pretty like in the middle millennial. And she was saying she wanted to write these books with therapy just being woven into the storyline. There's like disordered eating in there with some of the athletes as well. There's challenges with parents, right? Like I feel like I need to explain, right? Like it's not just like a spicy romance novel, right? Like it's more than that. There's a lot of complexities woven in. And I think she does a really good job of being a leader, like, because you said, right, the I lead piece of it. So that I feel like that definitely comes through in some way, because what she wants to do is write this narrative for the Gen Zers who are her audience at this point, like the 15 to like 25-year-olds who are going through this time in their life, because it's written about like college students, right? So like the 18 to 22-ish year old. That's who it's written. That's who the main characters are. So like leading with consent, leading with like having open discussions about therapy and seeing toxic friendships, and not just female-female friendships, but like female-male friendships, and seeing how platonic friendships can just be really supportive between males and females. So it's really cool dynamics within the book that I feel like she's probably leaning on life experiences just from the conversations that she had within the couple of interviews that I listened to. Leading a little bit on life experiences for some of this. But it's also really cool that she's able to write the narrative that our age group didn't necessarily have a decade plus ago to read and listen to, you know? So it's really cool to be able to see our generation or people of our generation changing the narrative for future generations to have more healthy, successful relationships. And again, maybe add in a little bit of spice as well. Hey, yo.
That does sound really interesting. I love that idea, especially because the Opportunity Program was created actually with teenagers in mind as the first step. And for me, one of the most important things was actually sexual education, because I felt that understanding yourself sexually and understanding also the opposite sex, if that's what you're interested to, or even if you understand yourself and you're interested in the same sex, that's very helpful. So just understanding the sexual aspects and connecting with the sexual energy is something that gives you so much self-confidence. And it doesn't mean that you have to go out and sleep with everyone. It's just really understanding your own body and your own needs and wants and being able to freely express these things. And I think the sexual education is just not correct. It doesn't give you this self-confidence, and you just, my sexual education, I don't even really remember it, because it was just once for a few hours in school. I'm talking about, yeah, I'm not talking about anything else. I'm just talking in school, and they threw us a condom and a banana. They literally did that, and they told us to put that onto the banana. And the other thing was that we had a book about, it was, I think, a kid getting to understand this from their parents. Like they were given the sex talk from their parents, and I think maybe how their baby brother or baby sister was created or something like this. So really, really just not helpful at all. It doesn't help you to understand. I only found out that female ejaculation is a thing when I was 24 years old. And I feel like this is something that should be taught in school. It may sound crazy, but it also gives you the understanding that women also get to enjoy themselves. And this was something that was very neglected, I feel, when we were younger. Maybe it's changing, but kids are getting their information from Google. They're getting misleading information as well. And they are asking their friends, they're asking other people. They're looking at TikTok a lot. So there's a lot of information out there, but if it's the correct one and if it's the supportive one, that's a whole different story. So having someone write a series about this and also intertwining it with the normal, or often, this is, I said, normal, it shouldn't be normal, but it's just the norm at the moment that teenagers are going through so many challenges, and anorexia being spoken about is huge. It's great. Any kind of eating disorders, whether in that direction or into another direction, because a lot of teenagers are also choosing to just stuff themselves with unhealthy foods because they have an emotional lack inside of them. So this makes me interested and intrigued in actually reading one of her books, also for the opportunity aspect regarding teenagers and being able to implement aspects of that in a fun, enticing, uplifting, but still educative way. I love it. Thank you for introducing her.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the topics can be heavy, but they're explained with such like an ease and flow that it's part of normal life rather than like harping on the fact that she has an ED or a disordered eating pattern. Like she just gets hangry a lot, right? And then realizes it towards the end and then gets the help that she needs. So rather than it being like the main aspect of the books, like 100% the romance novel, like the romance piece of it is like the main aspect of the book, but it's really cool that all of these other aspects of real life are interwoven into it in a seemingly seamless way.
Very cool. Love it. Should we move to my author?
Should we switch gears completely? Is that what you're asking?
Yep. Let's go 180 degrees into the other direction.
All right, guys, just for some perspective, my author was born in 1987. Miko's author was born in 1900. Just throwing that out there. So who'd you choose, buddy?
I chose Antoine Saint-Exupéry. Do you know who that is?
I have no idea who that is.
You will. Give me a second. So, he was born in 1900 in Lyon in France. And he wrote, I think it's the most translated book in the world. If like apart from the Bible and the Quran and things like that. After those books, you have him. It is the author. No, wait. I'm going to tell you a little bit about backstory first. Yeah. So he was born in a family of 3 sisters and 2 brothers. He had a mother and a father. However, the father died when he was 4 years old. And then he was raised in a family just full of women. They also had some female support, as in maybe, how do you call them, like house ladies or something like this, where they would help you with chores. And then there was also a situation where his brother got extremely sick one day, and that day he called Antoine Saint-Exupéry to him, and he wanted to ask him to write down his testament. He was very young. They were both very young. But the brother said, I'm going to die, and I want you to get all of my toys. So he wrote down everything that he wanted him to get, like the weapons and the whatever it was that they were having. Sadly, that night, the brother actually died. And that was the moment that Saint-Exupéry decided that material things are not of importance, that the human connection is what is far more important than anything else. I'm still getting tears in my eyes when I'm talking about this, because it really touched me, this experience, and it must have been super hard. I can just imagine losing. I don't even want to imagine losing my brother, but being that young and having someone ask you to write down their testament, and oh my God, horrible. So yeah. This was one of his most impactful experiences in life. Later on in life, he was flying for the military. So first he encountered aviation when he was 12. This was the first time he was flying with an airplane, not himself, but he was allowed to join an airplane ride. And in 1900, this is crazy because this was extremely new back then. But he found this passion very quickly. He loved it from the moment that he stepped into it. And even before that, he started fantasizing about it. And this is another thing. So he played a lot with his siblings, and he imagined a lot of things, made up games, created toys out of not much or virtually nothing. And he decided as well, very early on, that the important thing is not the material things that you have, but it is what you believe you can achieve. So the vision that you have is so much more potent and more important. So as long as you have a clear vision and you know which direction you want to go on in, the material things are just going to manifest themselves. This was his belief. So a manifesting generator, as you can see, with the 3420 channel, super, super powerful. So manifesting in the now, pretty much, like this is what the channel is about. However, the decision-making process is emotional in his case. And this chart is apparently extremely accurate because they have this time of birth from his birth certificate. So apparently this is really the time of birth he was born, and he's an emotional manifesting generator, a 4-6 emotional manifesting generator. And he has a single definition. The only two centers that are undefined and actually completely open are the head center and the ego, and everything else is defined. And he also has a lot of throat gaze, a lot of manifestation going on there. He has the energy coming from the spleen, going through the root, going up into the throat, and then also coming down from the ajna from the 1762. He was someone that would write his stories and write them over and over and over and over again until it is perfect. Because his vision was that he will impact and influence future generations with his writing. So from the get-go, he was believing that this was, are you having an idea, an inkling of who this could be? No. I just saw her big eyes, googly eyes. I thought maybe she knows.
I just think that's so cool for him to have that like feeling already. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I feel like when people write, it's not always with the forethought of, I'm going to make an impact generationally, you know? So, okay, continue. I'm on the edge of my seat.
Yay. I hope everyone listening as well. So he would sometimes write it 20 times or 30 times over and over and over again until he felt it was perfect, until he felt he found the right words to express what was important for him to express. So, as you know as well, 1939, World War II started. So he was involved in all of this as well. He joined the military when he was young. And then he was called into the military over and over again. He flew as well for the postal service. So this was one aspect that he loved because he kind of combined writing and aviation. And he also started writing his own books. However, there was a situation where he crashed and he made two very important close friends. And one of those friends crashed. I think this was the situation where one of his friends crashed in the desert, and then he went to try to find him. It's either that this situation happened that he went to fly and find his friend. He was looking in the Andes over for forever to find his friend, and then he found him, and then he took him back. And I don't know if this was the time where he was also stranded, but there was a time where he crashed in the desert and he was going without water for a very long time, 4 days, until someone found him. And this person then provided him with water. However, this time of not having water and being stranded in the desert is where he came up with his most influential book. And that is because he always wanted a son. And this moment was where he was encountered with a little blonde boy who was telling him very wise and insightful things. And this is how he came up with the story of The Little Prince. So he is the author of The Little Prince. It is one of the most translated books. It is a book that people start reading at the age of childhood. And what happened with me is that I did read this quite a few times in my life. I've read it over and over and over again, and it came in different time periods. What I love about it is that kids can understand it, and you will always get a deeper or another meaning out of it. This happens with every book, honestly, that no matter when you read it, you will pick up different things from the book. But to me, The Little Prince is just so magical because it has so much wisdom inside, and you can take pretty much any sentence out of it and you will find a deeper meaning in it. So I would like to read a few quotes from this book because I really love it. So the first quote is, "And now here's my secret, a very simple secret. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye." And this is again going back to one of the first experiences, that most traumatic experiences that he had with his brother, where he's going away from the materialism and he's going into the connections between humans, or things that the eyes can't see, but the heart can see and feel. Then another story was that the little prince, he has a rose that he keeps taking care of. And in this connection, I think the fox comes at this point in time, and he's wondering why he's taking care of this rose so much. And the little prince answers or explains that it is the time you have wasted for your rose that makes your rose so important. So again, it's not about the material or the rose itself, but it is how you connect with it and what you've put into it, what the time and effort. So I wouldn't say, personally, I wouldn't say wasted. It's just the time you've put into the rose, but it's still beautiful. And he keeps going back to this material aspect. So another quote was, "The most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or touched. They are felt with the heart." And then the little fox says, "People have forgotten this truth." The fox said, "But you mustn't forget it. You become responsible forever for what you've tamed. You're responsible for your rose," which is also a really interesting thing. So the background to this is that the fox starts to feel a deeper connection with the little prince. And then there's also a sheep that is coming into the picture. And then there's this rose. And there are all these things that the little prince is connecting with on a deeper level. And the fox is basically saying that you're becoming responsible for the things that you're taming, quote unquote. So for the things that you're connecting with on a deeper level. So you're taking on the responsibility, and whether it's friendship, whether it's family, whether it's people that you just take into your life, you automatically become responsible. And in this connection, I would like to go to Sadhguru, who's taking this word responsibility apart. Instead of taking it together, you basically have the ability to respond. Responsibility. And that is, to me, one of the most powerful things that I have learned in my life, because having responsibility is having the ability to respond and having the choice to respond. So no matter what is happening in your life, you always have the ability to respond and the choice to respond, or you have the choice not to do so. So stepping out of something or stepping into something. So you can lean back and say, "Oh my God, life is so horrible and everything is happening to me." Or you're taking on the warrior mode and you're saying, "No, I have the power, I have the ability, and I can change things if I want to change things." It doesn't mean you have to get involved into everything, but you can always change whatever it is that you're facing. So this is just a little bit about Saint-Exupéry, one of my absolute favorite authors of all time.
I've never read this book, but as you were, I know the surprise on your face. I just downloaded it on Libby, so I will be reading it this week. I'm excited now, because it sounds like it's quote unquote a children's book, but there are so many deeper life lessons. Like in The Alchemist, right? Like I had to read that in high school, but I've also reread that like as an adult, and it hits so different. So the way you've described this, I feel like The Little Prince would be very similar in that sense.
Yeah, and it's so easily written, or understood. The words are simple, but the the meaning or the impact is so profound. Yeah, you're going to love it. Okay, and for
I'm
everyone that
excited.
hasn't
Next
read
week, I
that,
will give you a full breakdown of.
yes,
Wait, what's your PSA? Go for it.
no. For everyone that hasn't read this book and that is listening, I would highly recommend you download it as well as an audiobook, or you buy the actual book. It's really worth having, and even if you don't keep it, you can gift it to other people. It's really, really fantastic and easy to read.
Love that. Very cool. Yeah. How old were you, do you think, the first time you read The Little
We've
Prince?
always had it. I think my parents always had it. So I must have been not even able to understand what they were telling me when they were reading it to me. And I think it's
That's
really one
cool.
of the best books for kids to read, to have it being read to them as well. I love it.
Yeah. Did you have it OG in
Yeah,
French?
I'm assuming. My mom read it to me.
Choose a
I'm,
language.
I'm assuming, but I do own it in English and German as well.
That's fair.
This
Very
was
cool.
fun.
Yeah,
I love talking about books.
that was really fun.
We
Maybe
should
we
do
can do
another
this
author.
quarterly and yeah,
I
and
have
bring
another one
a
in
bring a
mind.
nerdy book sesh in. Of course you do. Fun fact, Hannah Grace was not my first like smut author choice, but I couldn't find the other author, like any information on the other author. So,
Ooh, then you can do it
TL
next time
Swan,
again.
if you guys are interested.
Oh,
I
I've heard of
I
her.
can't find anything on her. Yeah, but if you guys want some really solid smut, TL Swan is where it's at.
Very good. This was so funny, the contrast. It was a real pleasure once
Uh,
again being here with all of you and with you as well, Celestina, as always. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you want to connect with us or have some recommendations on topics, just hit us up on Instagram at HeartcoreHD. And we hope to see you next time. Thank you for listening.
Ciao, guys. Bye.